It's Brainwashed with Dr. Tom and Guitar Picks with Will Little. Frank Zappa, You Are What You Is.
You Are What You Is. Frank Zappa is a big influence. It's just amazing the compositions that he came up with, the people that he played with, and the sound that he got. And the fact that he had the courage to say some of the political statements that he said in his music, both in his music and just outright in interviews and things like that. You know, he just kind of had a throw caution to the wind attitude about everything, and he was very serious about what he believed in and you know, the sound that he produced, from what I understand. You know, he was very strict with his band about rehearsal and, you know, substance abuse and things like that. Those were all strictly taboo with him, and they were very serious musicians who cranked out a lot of phenomenal music that I, you know, haven't even been able to wrap my head around. This is it's a real fun song. It's kind of got some crazy lyrics going on, and it's got a good up-tempo disco feel, so it's got it's a little bit more accessible than some of the real crazy out there esoteric Frank Zappa stuff. So that's why I chose that as an influence for maybe some people that haven't heard Frank Zappa before.
So you didn't choose Planet of the Baritone Women?
No. You know, another real good album of his is called Waka Jawaka, and I think there's only 4 tracks, and they're real long, mostly instrumental, and that was probably the first Zappa album I got. But you know, wanting to include a little bit of everything, such as, you know, his political commentary and off-the-wall lyrics and things like that. That's why I chose You Are What You Is.
Okay, it's Brainwashed with Dr. Tom and Guitar Picks with Will Little. CSNY 4+20.
Yeah, 4 and 20, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Big fan of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. This is a real short, real simple, finger-picked style Stephen Stills song. I mean, I guess it should really be attributed to Stephen Stills because he's the only one playing on it, but it's still under the CSNY catalog.
Yeah.
Out of the group, you know, they're all phenomenal musicians. They all have their own character and signature sound to them. You know, you can instantly hear Graham Nash and know it's Graham Nash or Crosby or any of them. Especially Neil Young too, but Stephen Stills, for me, he writes the songs that really speak to me. The lyrical content of it and just the way that he sings and the way that he plays, I think, is totally unique and often underappreciated. It's a real stark reality song that he's talking about, just being disappointed with where his life is going, with loneliness and, you know, not wanting to end up in a dead end job trying to make ends meet, which I think is what the lyrics are talking about how his father or the character in the song's father, you know, worked all day and didn't really have anything to show for it. And it's not a happy song. It's not a long one either. It's real quick and to the point, and it kind of leaves you with a very down note, but I mean, I think that's the balance in life, you know. Just like before I said, optimism can go a long way, you know. Having a kind of grim reality and grim outlook on things can kind of get you through some rough times too. And this song has definitely, you know, spoken to me in some of the more disappointing times in my life and kind of helped keep things in perspective.
Who is not on the list?
Who's not on the list?
Yeah.
Man, it's a pretty big list. You know, obviously, just traditional bluegrass there's nothing really on there, but that is a huge influence to me. I love the sound of it. I can sit there and play bluegrass all day long. I really don't have the opportunity to, but when I do, it's always a good time. I'm a big fan of the chop. Things like that. Obviously Bill Monroe would be at the top of that list as far as traditional bluegrass and things like that. Who else isn't on the list that I've been listening to a lot lately? Obviously, kind of hard as a guitarist or, you know, someone playing stringed instruments to really cite a lot of electronic or dance type feels, but I have been getting a little bit into the drum and bass and the jungle feels. I really like the high tempos and the drum patterns that they use, and, you know, hope to incorporate bits and pieces of that into our sound. And, or even on my own. I do spend a little bit of time on the computer just writing songs in that vein, just with software, which I think most of it is done that way anyway. Mm-hmm. Classic Motown is a big influence. I guess I didn't get to any of that, but mm-hmm. like Tower of Power, having the nice horn section and the vocals, usually has a lot of call and response in the vocals. You'll hear duets with a female vocalist and a male vocalist, and just the feel that those songs have, the rhythmic feel of it is a big influence. A little bit of classical, very little, but there is a little bit in there as far as an influence, and just local musicians around the town that I get to play with on small scales and bigger scales. Just people that you'll play at an open jam with can influence you in a huge way. Show mm-hmm. you a new way of looking at the instrument, new way of tackling styles. Abe Reed, for example, and the Spike Drivers have a real good jump boogie blues feel that's very very fun to listen to and very fun to play, and having the opportunity to play with him some off and on whenever he comes through town, mm-hmm. I've definitely learned a lot playing with them as far as rhythmic styling and phrasing and things like that.